All right, moving on. We're covering Bjork and Debut. In the opening montage, you heard Human Behavior, and now you're going to hear Big Time Sensuality.
It takes courage to enjoy it. Be careful and be gentle. Big time sensuality.
Okay, Matt, what are the stats on Bjork?
So Debut by Bjork comes in at number 62 in the 1990s on Best Ever Albums, just one ahead of Pearl Jam Versus, what we just covered. So these are back-to-back. Debut is number 5 in 1993, number 330 of all time. It's Bjork's fourth highest-rated album on Best Ever Albums, behind 1995's Post, 2001's Vespertine, and 1997's Homogenic. And I think we're covering all of those. Or is that homogenic? I'm not sure how you pronounce that, but Debut did not make Rolling Stone's list, and Bjork is ranked number 37 of overall artist rankings on Best Ever Albums.
Nice. Yeah, we're definitely covering her a couple more times this decade. Bjork was born Bjork Guðmundsdóttir in 1965 in Reykjavik, Iceland. We did cover her before when she was in the band The Sugar Cubes. That was back on season 3, bonus 24. This is her debut album, hence the title, and following the dissolution of the Sugar Cubes. She has 11 studio albums, with her most recent being Fossora in 2022. Genres include art pop, avant-garde, electronic, or electropop. Influences. Bjork has said that she was influenced by, quote, everything. So that's the first time we've heard that. She has, more specifically, she cited Stockhausen, who was a early electronics artist that we did not cover, Kraftwerk, Brian Eno, and Mark Bell, as well as singer-songwriters like Shaka Khan, Joni Mitchell, and Kate Bush specifically. Similar artists to her, that could go in a lot of directions, but some I picked out from a long list are Goldfrapp, Aphex Twin, Tricky, Joanna Newsom, Grimes, Laurie Anderson, FKA Twigs, Charlie XCX. There's really kind of all over the place. Her highest charting single is Earth Intruders, which reached 84 in 2007. And her album Vespertine reached 19 in 2001 on the Billboard 200. Some facts about her. She's got a 3-octave vocal range. In her teens, she formed an all-girl punk band called Spit and Snot. And then she formed a jazz group after named Exodus, which I thought was funny. She describes herself as a big jazz head. The Sugar Cubes actually appeared on SNL in 1988. I don't think we brought that up when we talked about them. Nelly Hooper produced this album. He also produced Massive Attack, as well as Soul to Soul and Sinead O'Connor, all artists we've talked about to one extent or another. She moved to London after the Sugar Cubes disbanded or went on hiatus, and she was really influenced by the underground club scene that was going on there at the time, as I'm sure you picked up listening to this. She said, quote, "As a music nerd, I just had to follow my heart, and my heart was those beats that were happening in England. And maybe I'm understanding more and more as I get older is that music like Kate Bush has really influenced me. Brian Eno, acid, electronic beats, labels like Warp." And then finally, she has written more than half of the songs on this album years before she even started making it. And French director Michel Gondry, most famously of Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, directed the music video for Human Behavior, which is well worth a watch if you have not seen it. I think it got a lot of MTV play as well at the time.
Is that where she's getting chased by a bear or something like that in the woods?
And she's like in a treehouse, and there's a lot going on. It's definitely got that Michel Gondry style to it, for sure, but it's very entertaining. Okay, so Bjork as a solo artist. I only know her as that swan dress back at the MTV Music Awards, but let's talk about her debut. Let's start with John this time.
Yeah, so it's a really interesting album. The first time I listened to it was in an open space,
Hmm.
and I was sort of neutral on it, which is a weird spot to be in Bjork's world because I think it's designed to some degree for an opinion. Even though it's clearly defined by things like house and club music and jazz for sure,
Hmm.
and jazz fusion are the things that jump out immediately on this. There's always a part of Bjork that strikes me as a little bit like show tunesy as well, like it informs her
I get that.
music.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say. And so it's an interesting amalgamation of things. This album didn't really start to shine for me a little bit until repeated listens, but also when I put on headphones. And I think when I put in headphones, I was able to sort of get into the space that she was going for a little bit more. It's it's an interesting album in the sense that at the beginning you get a couple sounds and usually one of them is soft and one of them is harsher, but then
Hmm.
when you put on the headphones you start to see underneath that contrast of what sounds like one harsh sound and one softer sound, you get layers to both of them underneath it. So I would compare this album to sort of like picking up like a rock or going into a forest and you see the stuff, but then you explore a little bit more and you find, oh, there's things both subtle and large within this ecosystem. There's a feel almost like a nature type feel whenever I hear Bjork too, and I don't know if it's informed by the fact that I know she's from Iceland, and so I like give her sort of like Earth Goddess vibes, or if it's part of how I hear it. I think it's probably in the middle, to be quite honest. I think I'd hear it even if I didn't, because there's natural elements and a little bit of that found music sound in a lot of the stuff here. That's why it's not surprising that someone like Brian Eno influenced her. And yeah, you hear Nelly Hooper, whether it be the earlier stuff like Massive Attack, or I think later like Six Underground, right, by the Sneaker Pimps. The famous version of that is a Nelly Hooper mix and stuff, and kind of the down tempo, you know, elements of club and trip
Yeah.
hop, trancey type sound. I think that's what Nelly Hooper brings to this album,
Yeah.
which I think is needed because I think without that level of focus, this would have been a little bit too esoteric for me and maybe not wrote me in. But I think the production ultimately is what moves this from a middle of the road album to me to a stronger than middle of the road album for me. There still is a little bit of a um, like a disconnect from me totally with Bjork compared to other challenging singer-songwriters that we've covered, like, maybe like a Kate Bush or PJ Harvey or something. I
Hmm.
don't know. I feel like they're a little bit more accessible for me, even though they're coming from an art rock or a challenging music uh,
Yeah.
lens. I can't say what it is exactly. I can't say if it's because it goes more into the club area of things, which has never felt like a comfortable house for me to totally, no pun intended, for me to go and live in, or if it's her voice, which can throw me a little bit because it veers from like little girl with wonder to sort of like eerie at times, and
Yeah.
it's hard to kind of explain that mix because you don't hear that very often. But still, I like this album. There's a lot of really good ideas on this album, and a lot, especially the more you listen to it, you appreciate. I'm not super familiar with Bjork's catalog outside of the songs that broke through, like Human Behavior on this one, or It's Oh So Quiet, right? And songs like that. And I don't feel like It's Oh So Quiet gives me an idea of what's coming later from Bjork as well. I feel like it was probably more novelty, but this one still gets a thumbs up for me.
Yeah. What about you, Matt?
A similar with John. The first time I listened to this, again, the only thing that I knew was Human Behavior, and maybe I was getting a little nature feel too, John, and maybe that's just because of the
Okay.
video. I was just like so like I'm like, oh yeah,
Oh,
she's
okay.
being
Yeah.
chased in the woods by the bear.
Yeah.
That's just kind of
Oh,
that
yeah.
image like
I
stuck
know
out
the
of my head.
video, but that
Yeah.
I didn't watch it this week. Yeah.
But that was all that I knew, and I was excited to listen to this because I've heard so many good things about her and know that she's kind of this respected artist and all this. And so the first time I listened to it, I was first surprised by how much of a dance album this is. I was
Yeah.
not expecting Bjork to be dance music was not a predominant genre that came to my mind when I thought of what it would sound like listening to her. And it's not filled entirely with dance tracks, but I would say that's the overarching theme here. I would say most of the songs are some sort of club dance, I don't know, techno, whatever you want to call it, type vibe. So I was a little either surprised and then a little maybe off-put by that a little bit as well in the beginning. And I was also, the first time I listened to this, I remember kind of being tired of her voice by the end of the record, that it was, because she's got this very distinct voice, right?
Yeah.
And it was and she's kind of, I don't know how you describe it. At times it's a little piercing. It's not a yodel, but it's got a little yodel-like quality to it, that it's kind of the vibrato and the different directions that she goes. And it's distinct, right? And so I was a little off-put by that. So I think repeated listenings were definitely needed for me in this record. And the more I listened to it, the more I became okay with what I was hearing, and then eventually got to the point where I started liking it, right? Like, I think that, we talked about that single we covered earlier. Was it Acer or whatever that was, the Fly Me to the Moon and whatever? Mm-hmm. That was just like way too much. This to me is way more accessible. I liked a lot of the beats. I thought a lot of the stuff on here was catchy. And I like the production as well. I thought the free jazz, like there is like that free jazz thing of like Aeroplane and the Anchor song that kind of has these, it's like a variety of saxophones that are kind of, playing with each other, but also kind of, it's discordant sounds that you're getting there. But it's one of those things where initially you go, ooh, what's going on there? And then you listen to it more and it's, it fits in a little bit better. And I ended up liking those, the more I listened to it. A song like Come to Me, that was one of my favorite songs. That was some of this reminded me of like, not early, but later Radiohead, and then I could see that, I'm sure that Tom York and those guys were really into Bjork as well. But a song particularly like Come to Me was kind of like, wow, that's definitely something I could see them doing, later on. But yeah, I really, and it's interesting. As I was listening to it, the song Like Someone in Love, which is it's almost like a harp that's like this ballad that's being played on a harp. Yeah. And I was thinking, I was like, this sounds like a Frank Sinatra type song. And oddly enough, it's a cover song, standard, right? Yeah. It's a standard, right? Yeah. It sounds like it. And it was done by, not by Frank Sinatra, but by, the White Christmas guy. What's his name? I just saw that. Bing Crosby to cover that. Thank you, Josh. Yes. So she kind of fluctuates. She throws in these little kind of like, curveballs at you that you don't expect coming. But I don't know, somehow it all fits. I wouldn't say that I loved this record or was like, oh my God, like I need to kind of consume Bjork like all over the place now. But I definitely, I was definitely interested. And the more I listened to it, the more I liked it. And it made me excited to hear the other records that she's got, because I think that she's got others that we're going to cover here, but more highly regarded. But it's unique and I enjoyed it. So I'm definitely a thumbs up on it.
Yeah, I'm curious if she's going to be an artist that every album is going to be different or kind of has a different.
It wouldn't surprise me.
Thing. So I'm a bit higher on this album than you guys. I really like this album, and it kind of right away grabbed me. I like and I have no really relationship with Bjork or her music, so so I was coming to it fresh. I really like the kind of electropop feel of this album. Every song she does something different, like you said, Matt. There's either like an interesting drum beat or like a instrument choice. Like on Venus Has a Boy, there's some violins in there that really mix things up. There's More to Life Than This is pretty much a pure dance track, but it's really interesting when she like quote unquote leaves the song and like closes the door and starts singing and then like goes back in. It's really hard to describe, but it is literally like she's taking a break and the audience or whatever, and then like going back out into the audience.
Well, it does say that was recorded live.
Yeah. I don't know what that means, but I like the harp on Like Someone in Love. and then like Anchor Song at the end has sax. So like she does, every song kind of has a unique little thing that drew me in. Her voice is really interesting because it seems like it wouldn't be, like, she's not a very good singer sometimes when you think about it. Like she's really like raspy or seems strained when she's singing, but then she can like really change it and go like full power and have like a growl to her. It's just she is like kind of a singular voice in that way. I think the Icelandic dialect or kind of accent also kind of plays into that some as well. The I don't know, the trip hop thing really kind of struck me as well. I think that is playing into it. I think that's what John is saying about the production and Nelly Hooper. I think whatever he brought to this, I'm really kind of picking up on. I don't know. It's just one of the more interesting and kind of captivating electronic albums that we've listened to, if you would classify it as that. It's just, I don't know. It kind of toes the line, not toes the line. It really kind of splits the difference between what I'm interested in electronic music and the pop, and like the blending of the two really worked well for me, and kind of that dance kind of foundation. I guess what I'm saying is I can really pick up on her like influence into the acid house scene in London and where that comes from, and I think she's taking the parts from it that I like and putting it into her own music. So this was a really I think this is a great album, and I liked it the more I listened to it. So thumbs up.
Yeah. Also, can we talk about how interesting Bjork is, like as a human to look at, and not in a bad way. She's a very unique person who, when you combine it with her unique sound and her
Hmm.
artistic spirit and stuff, I just feel like Bjork has always felt to me like a walking art like exhibit to some degree,
Yeah.
but not in the way that someone makes themselves one. She was just sort of born, you know what I mean? And that she's Icelandic, but is old, her family comes from Iceland, but she looks vaguely like lots of other things, right? It's kind of hard to place exactly where Bjork comes from, right? You could have like 15 different answers to that
Hmm.
question. And she's sort of diminutive, but she also has an outsized presence to her a little bit. And you can't, depending on where it's at, she can go from sort of like almost like sort of like an animal figure to like very cute or even sensual in her own way to like
Yeah.
it's hard to put your finger on her a little bit. So she's a very interesting artist in that way. And unlike somebody like PJ Harvey, who vacillates between sort of androgynous and decidedly feminine, kind of those two areas, or she kind of exists in Bjorkdom, I think, a little
Yeah.
bit, which is I think what makes people very interested in her, because there aren't many people that just naturally are that charismatic and enigmatic. So I just thought I'd throw that in there.
Yeah, she's a real Rorschach test, I think. Or
Yeah.
she's singular in her own way as well.
And her name also
Yeah.
is like almost a perfect name for someone exhibiting that space. So, yeah.
Yep. Yeah, good stuff.